what? Like, why couldn't they make something half as cool as some of the shit when I had kids? You would turn it sideways and slide it, and it was a texting phone. That was my second cell phone.
The printer that I have now, the average desk-sized printer, comes with an app, and I can fax things through my phone.
Really?
Cheers! And welcome
Cheers.
to episode 5 of Fuck Your Podcast.
5 already.
5. I'm Emma Pardo.
I'm Katy Martin, and today we're talking about the generational gap. Hot topic of conversation, all over TikTok at least.
Something like that.
Something. So, what are you drinking today?
I need
Pepsi, the old reliable. The old
reliable.
Mm-hmm. So I found this. I've been nursing it since this morning when I got.
I love those. Love them.
You gotta be careful. Do you know how many milligrams of caffeine?
They get you jacked up.
There's 200.
I know.
200.
Jacked.
I would have
up.
I'm about halfway through it, and I can feel the power coursing through my veins. So it actually was a really good. It was actually a really good like lunchtime pick me up. But
I know I stick to my Pepsi because I can't get energy drinks. I love Alani knew the brand itself. The energy drinks, okay, I like their vitamins. Anyway, Alani new sponsor us.
It tastes good. There's only 10 calories. There's no sugar. Bunch of vitamins. A lot of caffeine.
They're good for you. It's just a lot of caffeine, and the general taste is not my favorite. It's not bad. It's just not my favorite.
No, this one's cherry slush or cherry freeze or something. Cherry slush. So I like it.
Not bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Not bad. Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
So today we're talking about generational gap because there's a little bit of a generational gap between Katy and I. I mean, Katy, what is your like generation? Like, what are you gen?
Like, officially?
What?
Technically,
I don't even know what I am. You're a millennial.
I'm technically a millennial. Like I'm like 28 days shy of being a Gen X. So like I'm right at the cutoff.
I'm Gen Z, and I think that's wild.
Same as my kid.
We're Zoomers. We're Zoomers over here.
We're Zoomers.
I think we're like Zoomers sounds too close to Boomers, and Boomers.
When did they start calling it Zoomers? Maybe that's me being out of touch.
I don't know.
But like Gen Z in general, or is it like is that a segment within Gen Z?
That is Gen Z. Yeah, Zoomers. Okay. Millennials preceding Generation Alpha. So late 1990s to early 2010s is Gen Z.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So I remember the grade ahead of me, like notorious of like the youngest Gen Xers, like the whole I don't give a fuck class. The school hated that group of kids. There was like I remember the graduation had, I think it was the class president or somebody made a speech like basically I know you guys are glad to see us go. but yeah, I remember
we were that, like my class was that class that everybody was like, you guys suck, like go away please. I think at least from what I remember,
don't know if it's the older that I get and having kids of the I have a Gen Z child and whatever is after that, I guess. I don't know what that's called. Miles' age, like kids that are in high school right now. Like,
what year was Miles born?
2006.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah, 2006.
He was almost 6'6".
Almost.
That's terrifying.
So I don't know if it's just because I'm a parent or like you see the stereotypes of like the young Gen Z and like kids that are in middle school and high school right now. I'm like, yeah, that's annoying. I don't know how teachers put up with that.
Right.
I think that could just be because I'm old, because I know I can guarantee you when my age of people were in middle school, we were also annoying.
We've said this before that I'm like an older soul for my generation.
That is true.
I feel like I belong a couple generations higher if you're going to categorically base me off of my personality, maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
That's fair.
And what was so wild is growing up, like being exposed to things like I think my parents raised me right. I think they raised me on good music and good manners and
Mm-hmm.
good sense of style, or
Made
like
you
at least
work.
like yeah, I have a good work ethic, all that good stuff. Um, it sounds so conceited, but really that's like what it is. I believe that they raised me right, and like I feel that's why I'm as or farther along than my generation. Because I just remember growing up and being like in grade school, like, you don't know the Beastie Boys? Like, who are you? You know what I mean? And that's like stuff
Right.
my mom and my dad were listening to growing up, or almost, or like in high school or whatever. Um, but yeah, I think it's gotten me far, I
That's
think.
something I can tell you from having kids, and then also it's my husband is your parents' age. Your my Justin's your mom's age
Anywho,
for sure. So
yeah.
I can tell you being a parent, like there is some sort of when you succeed at like getting your kids to like some of the music or know some of the music or and appreciate some of
Hmm.
that stuff, you get some sort of weird pride out of that. Just like when they like the same things that you do or they like get super nerdy about the same pop culture stuff that you do. There is some sort of
Right.
weird satisfaction in that. There's like pride with that. Um but
I'm
just kind of
finding that with Crew though.
yeah,
Like with Star Wars, introducing him
mhm,
to well, he knew Star Wars, but he knew the newer Star Wars, not like
right.
the old school stuff.
Yeah.
And over the past couple months, we've been like walking him through like the old school stuff, letting him process it, and he loves it. He knows what every character, who every character is, all that good stuff. And I feel that I'm like he's gonna go far with that. Like
Right.
that's good. Star Wars we'll keep him out of trouble.
Teaching them right. You're teaching them right. That's
Right.
the yeah, because I have one kid who's completely immersed in Star Wars, and the other one who's just like, eh. And I'm like, seriously, the house that you
Which one's
grew up in?
which?
Gabrielle was the one who was
Oh, that's
indoctrinated
right.
from a young age.
Yes. Yes.
Super, super indoctrinated. Um, oh, I need to mention one thing though. Like, even the difference in generation, like, it doesn't matter your age. Like, you're either an Apple whore or you're not. Like, we have all Apple products.
I know. I'm like
It doesn't matter.
iPhone, iMac,
Apple Watch,
Mac. I know Apple Watch. We
Apple
have the same
Watch.
one. It's
Do
the
we
same
really?
color.
Oh, yeah, we do.
AirPods. I have two pair of AirPods. I
Mhm.
have my iPad,
I
my
have an
Apple
Apple
Pen,
TV hooked up to the
literally
TV back
sitting
there.
right here. We have an Apple TV.
Hmm.
Everything.
But
Everything.
once you go all in though, it's so easy. That's the
I could
thing.
not
Like,
half-ass it both ways.
oh
Like
no,
if it was,
absolutely not.
well, it's one way or the other. And Cole has only ever had like his iPhone and AirPods and an Apple Watch, I think. And I was like, if you're gonna get a new computer, get a freaking Mac. I'm
They
telling
all
you.
work with one another.
Yes.
It's insane. Like I and the whole thing of oh it's harder to use. No, no, it's actually they're easier.
Uh-uh.
They're so much easier to use. So
Yeah.
I once you go Apple, you're not going back at all. Like because everything is
There's no
everything's
there's
Apple.
no what's the rhyme you could do with that?
I don't know. I can't think of it. What rhymes with Apple. Once you go Apple, once you go Mac, you never go back.
There you go.
That's what makes the
That
most sense,
works. Anyway, this generational gap.
right?
Like I know you see it with your kids and like see it sometimes in Crew, but like he's 5. So it's not like I'm seeing so many things. It's just how he plays.
Hmm.
But I definitely growing up like, saw it in my sisters. Well, more recently, like when my youngest sister, she's 5 years younger than me, almost 5 years, a little less than 5 years, 4 years, whatever
Hmm.
it is, 4.5. Yeah, whatever. Um, like listening to her come to me for like advice on things like dating and relationships or her complain about work or her like it's just
Right. It's
day and
totally
night.
different. Hmm.
Even like from like 4.5 years, it's completely different. And I have a sister, Anna, and she's 3 years younger than me. So she's in between us two. And she like it's like half and half. Sometimes she does things that like fall under what more of like Ella does. And there's sometimes my sister's like, no, like Emma's way or opinion or whatever is correct on
Hmm.
that. I don't know how to describe that, but a teeter totter is like in that sweet spot of Gabrielle's age.
Right. Well, you know what's crazy is that you don't think of that big of an age difference, like five, let's say 5 years, for example. My kids have quite a bit in common.
Hmm.
But there's definitely, you can definitely see when you have one sibling who's out of high school, and then like 5 years later, which I guess is just a couple years later, honestly, because of the age
Hmm.
gap, but they're in high school, like for their 4 years, there's a huge difference in just that 5 years. And if you think about it, it's similar to like when you have babies, like you, which I know you don't know yet, but when you have a baby, the tools that you're at your disposal, and the gadgets and the shit that they make for babies, and then 5 years later you're like, oh my god, look at all these new gadgets and gizmos and things. And
Right.
now I see it and I'm like, what? Like, why couldn't they make something half as cool as some of the shit when I had kids? You're
I know,
lucky to
like
have
those
like a bouncy seat, like an exerciser, like those saucer things were like brand new
yes.
when my kids were babies. And it was like the most amazing thing ever.
What's so crazy is I see Maddie, and she's got those like wireless breast pumps that she could literally like walk
It's
around and do whatever.
amazing,
It's
right?
crazy. Like I don't know. I'm not ready to be a mother yet, but it's like
Oh man.
I need that whenever I am ready and when
Yeah.
it's time for that because that's just nutty. Like I need to be
You
we've
look like
this generation has made it
Mhm.
easier to get multitasking done. Get more
That's
done for
true.
your time. You don't have to go one at
It's
a time.
it's all instant gratification, which happened with the internet. So like that's, if you want to
True.
tell the difference, like where it sped up dramatically was when you could get online like easily, like where it was accessible to everybody. Like we're not going to get technical and be like the internet's been in existence since the early 80s. Well, like, we're not talking about like plugging a fucking phone into the side of a gigantic Mac, an Apple computer in the 80s. We're talking, and like connecting to a modem. We're
Right.
talking like easy accessibility, everyone had America Online, and like I would say like more than half of your friends. And this is when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So like we didn't get the internet into I was in
What
high
year did you
school,
graduate?
1999.
I was a
Mhm.
year old.
Right. Yeah. So graduated in 1999, and maybe the year before that, probably my freshman year, I think, because
Hmm.
my believe it or not, at the time my mom was fairly techie. Like we had a computer before other people had computers, stuff like that. She may have gotten them secondhand, but she was always fairly techie, and fairly computer savvy then too. So we had the internet, I would say like 1996, 97.
Hmm.
Just your regular dial-up internet. And but like by then, once you started to be able, like, it took a while, but once you could shop and like do other things on the internet, that's where the dynamic changed as far as consumers and just people in general, because
Right.
you were programmed to where you could get anything instantaneously. And then like now, what's crazy is you can tell the generations that adapted to that behavior and the ones that didn't. There's a difference between the adaptation and being born into it. So I hate saying it,
Yeah.
you were born into it. My kids were born into it.
Yeah.
Um, I adapted to it, and people that were just a
Right.
few years older than me were fucking either terrified or amazed by it. And
Right.
so I remember, like, I just remember the whole of being like fascinated, but there was something about that older, and that's the distinction between millennials. Like we had computer labs in school. Like we had computers. I think I always had access to
We
a
did
computer.
computer lab, but
Yeah, but you didn't have them in every classroom. You weren't
no.
not every people didn't own laptops. Like
But that
it
was
wasn't
even
very
like
common.
my senior year of high school, just 2016.
Oh
My
my
senior year
god.
of high school.
I had a 10-year-old, a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old when you graduated
um
high school.
like even then like we had I mean I'm not saying we didn't have technology. Obviously,
Right.
2016 we had a bunch of technology, but we weren't at the point where it was like every classroom had Chromebooks. That was like we were lucky if every classroom had smart boards, and you were lucky if your classroom had
What the fuck's a
Chromebooks
smart
that
board?
day.
I mean, I know what
A
a smart
smart
board is,
Yeah,
but like,
it's
I mean, I
touch
actually know what
touch
it is.
screen, yeah.
Oh, that didn't exist. I mean, shit, dry erase boards were brand new,
Right.
like when I was in high school. And when I went to college, the college still only had computer labs. Like, do you remember the multicolored iMacs? The ones that were like the big boxy
Yes.
iMac and they were all
Because
different
and
colors?
I only know that because and they were like rounded,
Right.
right? I only
Mm-hmm.
know that because I'm pretty sure my aunt or my uncle, somebody had one and they were like younger because my mom's the oldest. She like this is back when I was like 5.
Right.
I don't know how old I was. It was like I was young. I remember they had one. And I think it was blue. Anyway, yes, I remember
Mm-hmm.
those.
Right.
And now look
So
at them like we're filming this
yeah, right,
on
exactly.
laptops.
Yeah. Like we're filming this on laptops and like talking to each other. I wonder, I can't remember like when FaceTime became a thing. I remember Skype, like Skype was like this brand. I remember that when that was brand new.
FaceTime came out in 2010.
Oh, okay. It's been a
And that
while.
came out with iOS 4.
4. Okay.
Yeah,
I
so that would have
didn't
been
I didn't even get an iPhone until 2015. I
let me see if
had
I
so
have.
I went from my first I didn't have a cell phone until Gabrielle was born. So I didn't even get a cell phone until 2001.
Let me see. My first cell
Do
phone,
you,
and I want to pull up a picture.
do you know how old I
This,
am?
the LG Remark,
Oh yeah.
and it was a tiny little thing that slid up like this, and then
I
it
had
slid down
okay. So I had
like
something
that.
similar. It didn't mine wasn't that small, but my second phone was a you would turn it sideways and slide it and it was a texting phone. That was my second cell phone. I had I can't even let's see if I have anything that looks similar. It's probably a Nokia of some sort. Hold on, let me look at my TV remote. Okay.
Okay.
So here's the remote to my TV, okay?
Yeah.
So this is practically what my first cell phone looked like. The only difference is like right here where all these number pads are was a teeny ass tiny screen and it had an antenna that you could pull out of it. That was my
So
first cell phone.
I only know those
A little
because
bit smaller. Maybe like, like maybe if you take off this last fourth of the size, like, but that's about what my first cell phone looked like. And then my second one was a flip phone. And then I had a variety of Androids, but I don't even think I had a decent Android smartphone until like
I'm
mm,
trying to find my
a
so
while.
I know those phones because when I was
Yeah.
younger, like if my grandparents had like that um where is it? It was a yellow Nokia flip phone. And I remember I used to like
Yeah.
when they got new phones, I played on it all the time. Like just it didn't have service or anything, but I would
That's still
like
more that's still more recent than any of the cell phones. I don't even think I could Google.
this one. I remember my grandpa gave us this one to like play with when he was done. Was
Right.
is that Nokia?
That's a
I don't know what it
Motorola.
is. Motorola, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even see. I'm like, what
I
is
had
that? As
a
the M is staring at me.
I had a Motorola um it was like a smartphone. Like I remember the last smartphone I had or the first actually it was the first smartphone I had. I had a texting phone.
Hmm.
Um but and then when I switched to a smartphone, which probably wasn't until I worked until I was running a roofing company and it was like 2013 and I had
Damn.
like I
I was in
20
eighth grade.
2012 like 2012 2013 and then I at some point during that time frame of my life is when I got my first iPhone.
Hmm.
And then I never went back. Like once I figured it out, then I never went back.
I
So,
had my mom was an Android user before she got an iPhone, and when she switched to iPhone, I think she switched to iPhone. Maybe no, she was Android for a while. My first phone was that little blue LG one, and then that one broke.
mhm.
And the neighbor next to us had like a one of those like actual like flip to text, not a slide
Right.
or a flip like normal. It was a flip texter one that I used for a while. And then I think my mom gave me her old Android. And that thing, the battery on that thing lasted like 45 minutes.
That's funny.
So then I switched to iPhone after that, and I've been iPhone ever since.
Well, instead of keeping like going down the iPhone route, if you think about from a technology standpoint, that's where you see like basically from the 80s
Mm-hmm.
going on, the technology has improved at a faster rate than technology has in history. Like
Right.
it's been the fastest. So of course kids are raised with it now at this point where you have I not to pat myself on the back, but like the whole elder millennial thing, or they call them
Mm-hmm.
zillennials because they're right between Gen X and millennials.
Right.
We had to adapt all the time, all the time,
Mm-hmm.
always be learning, always be learning. Because if you would have waited another 5 years, like I said, my brother's age and a few years younger than him, they just had that shit already, like in schools. Like he had computers younger, so it became younger and younger and younger. But if you think about it, the whole thing, the difference where one generation complains about the next generation because they had more faster, it's just become more obvious now. Like there,
Right.
because if you really think about it, and I want to know, what is it about society? I probably should have Googled this ahead of time. Like, what is it about society where you start to become like old and crotchety and your viewpoints start to change? Because if you really think about it, the whole greatest generation, they used to think the same shit about boomers that boomers think about Gen Z. But you got to remember, boomers were fucking hippies. They were
Do
hippies.
you have you seen the TikTok of the lady crying in a Great Clips? I think she was a Great Clips employee. And
Oh, she doesn't know.
she's like 60 and up is the last great generation. And it's like,
Oh,
okay.
that's not the same TikTok of the woman that's like, I don't understand why my kids want nothing to do with me.
No.
There's some correlation there, lady.
Well, like what I want to know as we're like talking about this, do you think there ever will be a time where we just don't have to, like from technology standpoint,
Hmm.
there's just never going to be an adapt? Or do you think that we're gonna, like, do you think we're at the point of, like, I don't feel like you said I was born into it, right?
Sure.
The stuff that comes out these days, I don't feel like I'm adapting. It's just like the way I
Oh,
think there's gonna be a point where we don't have to adapt. We're just going to know because of the coverage that all this technology gets. Like as
I
technology
mean,
advances, and media pushes these things and kind of gives you these. Like you have resources like YouTube
yeah.
and all these things that can walk you through how to use stuff. But that's like we're using the technology to use the technology, and I think there just comes a point where we don't have to adapt anymore as far as technology goes. Like it
I don't
that
think
big
that's
of an
true
adapt.
though. Maybe
Really?
okay, maybe not that big, but here's my
That's what I'm saying.
perspective.
Not that
And I
big. I
could
think we'll
and I
always
could
have to.
tell you that the last office environment that you and I were both in, there
Hmm.
were a couple people younger than you who could barely use a computer. And what's
And that just
crazy about
blows my
that,
mind.
and so this is the different, again, this is it's a paradigm shift going a kind of a different direction. Because I've had like technology, that's kind of like I had to learn, and you adapt, and then you
Hmm.
get to this place of complacency because shit's so easy. So you get a
Hmm.
kid who's been raised on a screen and they've had an iPhone in their hands since they were 8, and have had all of like basically all the information they could possibly get from this one resource,
Hmm.
like transitioning over to like using a different machine full time. If you either are resourceful or you're not. Like the resources are there,
Right.
and you're always going to have new resources. But if you lack the resourcefulness, that kind of is across the board. There's plenty of kids, I say kids, well, kids get, because if they're younger than you, they're my fucking kids age. But but I've seen some that it's like you put a computer in front of them and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, are you kidding me?
And you know what's
What?
so wild? Having crew at 5 years old, that boy knows how to work so much technology. It was like he was born and he already had the knowledge of
Right.
technology. And and this is no knock at any parenting that he's had. He just gets it.
Hmm.
And it's insane how fast he gets it.
Right. You either have you have a desire to, or you don't. And so sometimes I don't, like I said, I think you're always gonna have that. You're always gonna have that level of people that have to adapt. But again, and it could also be what they had exposure to. Like let's say you have somebody that didn't come from maybe they were a poor family and they maybe
Hmm.
only had access to certain technologies when they were in school, which
Right.
I get that. But there's one person that I'm thinking about in particular. I'm not going to name any names. but grew up in a fairly wealthy household where I'm like, what do you mean you don't like, my computer skills aren't that great. You went to 4 years of college.
Right.
What do you mean
Does
your
this
computer skills?
does this
What?
person fuel my hate fire?
I think
Is this
so.
somebody I know?
Yeah, it's somebody that you know. It's somebody that you know.
Give me a like inside hint that nobody else would know.
You might forget about her. Like, it's like, oh yeah, we work together. We
Okay.
don't need to decode it on the podcast here.
No.
I'll just text it to you.
Okay, I was
So
gonna
who I'm
say
talking
text it
about.
to me.
I'll just text it to you. But no, I'm not calling you. But I was shocked though. Like I liked her. Like I liked her.
I know. Okay, that's what I was hoping you
Okay.
saying.
That's who I'm talking about because I had that conversation.
But do you think
I have to resist the what the fuck? Like, I mean, that's one of those where I had to consciously swallow, don't say something unbecoming, because I was
people of like my generation and younger, do you think with their exposure to technology they lack social cues or social skills?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And again, I say that to have even just like evaluating my own kids. I have one who they're both great around people. Like they have manners. They will talk. They're quiet. I've seen Gabrielle in I've seen her in an environment with a group of people, but she always talks about having anxiety and not wanting to be around people, but she's great with people. And Miles, I'm not even trying to pick on him because what 16-year-olds really know how to pick up on social cues in an adult world? They pick up on some.
Yeah, I was gonna say they should pick up some.
But they're not going to pick up on the same social cues that their parents would. And it takes some good home training. That's what that takes. But
no
are there people of your generation who lack social skills or the desire to be around people or basic interviewing skills, like things that I hate to say that kids, again, the similarities that I have between Gen X and the reason why I maybe relate a little more to them, I'm like, I fit the two stereotypes. I have the stereotype that Gen X has really good work ethic, which is probably there's truth to it, right? That's why it's a stereotype. Like I fit into that, but then I fit into the technologically savvy, like a millennial. So I'm right in between, where that part of being Gen X was like my parents just kind of like kicked you out the door and you're like, figure it out, go fly, little birdie. Like,
right.
You had to take care of yourself or you starved to death. And like you had that more figure it out, where I can tell you some of that goes directly into parenting, because all of the things that we were put through that were really, really, really fucking hard, the millennials, I will say, we are the worst parents. We are the worst.
You think so?
Parents, and not from a place of not taking care of kids. We are the worst parents from spoiling our kids, because we wanted them to have all of the things we didn't have, and we wanted them to have all of the attention that we didn't get, because we didn't.
Got it.
Younger Gen X and elder millennials, we wanted our kids to have the love and attention and them to feel that they're special, that our parents didn't show us. And we also wanted them to have all of the things, the stuff, the toys, the gadgets, the shit that we didn't have.
I think that gets worse as parents get younger. Like,
I think so too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that.
It's not like, horrible, but it's just not. It doesn't get any better. There's no like.
Where do you think helicopter parents were like stemmed from? The millennial generation? I mean, because you have some.
No.
It would have had to been the millennials.
No, because the millennial generation is Justin millennial then?
No, Justin's Gen X.
So Gen X. That's right. So my mom, my dad, my dad is on the very end of a baby boomer.
Okay. I think my mom was kind of
the baby boom,
but she was more the older.
And what was I gonna say?
So you think they were helicopter parents?
No, not at all. Not at all. They weren't helicopter parents. That's something that I'm struggling with now is being kind of helicopter
Well, then that
with
means
like
millennials would be helicopter parents, like 100%. Because if they're older, they're Gen X. Your parents are Gen X, and your dad's almost a baby boomer. They were right in between the absentee parent and like they paid a little bit more attention to their kids, but they still wanted you to be really self sufficient because they were raised in a way that like kids were just meant to be seen and not heard. So they tried to make up for it, but they didn't get the full backswing
yeah,
until you get to millennials.
I don't feel like I was overly spoiled as a child. Like there were things that I got more traditional like discipline. I
Right.
got like I didn't get spoiled. Like we earned things, right?
Sure.
And that's something that I respect out of my parents as well is that everything that I've done in my life is something that I've earned. Like I had a job at the bowling alley that wasn't handed to me. Like I had to be the one to show interest like yes, I'd like to
Right.
work here. And people always thought that like, oh, you are the daughter of the owner, so you must get paid so much, right? No, I had the
Like, no,
same
I
wage as
earn.
everybody else.
Yep.
Yeah, I had to earn it. And same with buying cars and I had cell phones and stuff. So yeah, I was probably more spoiled than a
Mm-hmm.
traditional like parenting style, I guess.
Right.
But there was still a lot of things my parents like kept us in check on, like
Sure.
social cues and
Mm-hmm.
attitude and discipline,
Right.
all that stuff. Now today seeing like all the gentle parents,
Mm.
gentle
Mm.
parenting, I
We
can't
could
do
go
it.
down. No.
I don't judge anybody that does
So,
it. I can't do it. So I'm not going to do it. But that's also like something
I
that
might
is
judge some people that do it. I mean, because there's plus sides and there's downsides, right? But
right.
but there's also something to be said for a good ass whipping when a kid needs it. Like I'm
Right.
not. I mean, we spanked our kids. I'm not gonna like. There's no shame in that. Like
I
that
think
was just a
every
different.
kid deserves a healthy amount of fear of their parents.
Right.
Every child should fear their parents in a healthy way.
Right. So but I with my kids there were certain things, obviously there's certain things that I taught them, like they had responsibilities, but I could definitely say we 100%, and it was more me I think even than it was Justin, where I'm
Mhm.
just like buy them stuff, like they need to have this stuff. I was always told no. I was always told I couldn't have it. I was
Right.
the one that had to, and again it was that whole thing of there was probably more going on internally with me processing shit with my parents, but I
Right.
did it was a backswing. So you always have that to a degree where if
Mhm.
somebody's like, I don't know what's wrong with kids these days, they're fucking parents usually. Like I mean it's stemmed from something, which is also then stemmed from their parents, which is stemmed,
I
so
think
you can either
kids
break
are
the
getting
cycle.
bolder and bolder younger on.
But do you think
I
that's
could
just something that's like an evolutionary trait, or do you think that's because of the generation of parents that are taking care of them right now?
It's the generation of parents, in
Yeah.
my opinion. I don't think that's just evolution. Um, we can be bold with the amount of technology that we have, especially, you know, the kids being born into it now. As
Mm-hmm.
far as fearing less in the outside world, I believe. But yet again, we have people with so much social anxiety and I can't do this and I can't do that. And I prefer to be on my phone or not show up to things if it's an in-person, that social
Right.
anxiety. I'm talking about like when it comes to being like badass kids, like that need discipline, they're getting bolder
Yeah.
and bolder with what they're doing.
Yeah, because they can. They have like
Right.
they have access to different things where you didn't have
Right.
that before. It's talking about like social anxiety. I was talking about this over the weekend because I have to be in like it's got to be the right time, the right place with enough advance notice to go to like a social event. Like to
Mm-hmm.
go to it's different if it's something that's like small and intimate, but like if it's somebody that I went to high school with and they're like having a bridal shower, I'm like, ugh,
Mm.
and like
Please,
it's
God,
so
no.
and I know Emily's gonna hear this, which I've been looking forward to going to her baby shower
Oh,
because
that's different.
I have her
That's not.
presents. But then I'm thinking you're not gonna be there. I'm like, who's gonna be there? Who's gonna be there so I'm already going through, even though like
Am I
I
going to be
want
comfortable with the people in the
right.
environment?
And this is the weird thing because if you put me on the phone with somebody, if I have to interview 10 people, then I don't care. Like I'm selectively I told Justin I have very selective social anxiety. He's like, "Oh, do you mean like when we pull into the parking lot of a restaurant and there's too many cars and you already start freaking out about it when we pull into the parking lot?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, why do I do that?
Yeah.
Why do I do that?" But if you were to put me on a Zoom call or like I have to make a presentation in front of people, like I don't do that shit. So why do I have this weird selective social anxiety? It's just more of like
Right.
I gotta be in the mood
Well,
to do
here's the
it.
thing, like I am the type of person, and Cole is as well, who like being in our house and in our neighborhood, like if we like the neighbors, we'll go out and say hi. Like we'll be friendly and like see our neighbors, right? Let
Mm-hmm.
them know that they could trust us and we want to trust them,
Right.
right? Just having your neighbors back. And what's so funny is that I know some people that are my age that are like, I don't know my neighbors. I'm not gonna go talk to them. Like, well, they're your neighbors. They live
Yeah.
literally next door.
You guys share a property line. Like, and well, I mean, I could tell you I was probably like that when I was a little bit younger, but that was that whole thing of becoming like being an adult, like moving when I moved in
Right.
with Justin and then like getting to know those neighbors. But that's I can relate. Like I can relate to that where you don't know your neighbors, you don't go outside, you don't answer the door. Uh,
What's so funny is we have the technology like Ring cameras,
you
and
don't have to answer the door.
you don't have to answer the door and you can just see who's on there. And if you want to
Right.
ignore them, you don't even have to go to the door and like be afraid to make a sound. You
No,
just
and you
stay
don't have
where
to
you
answer the
are and look
phone.
at it on your phone.
Hmm.
A
You don't have
beautiful
to answer
thing.
your phone. You don't have to
You
answer if
can
it rings.
see.
I ring and I'm like, why the fuck is my phone ringing? Like text me. So let's all
I
right. So
will
I was
never forget sitting at the dinner table, and we had a wall phone at the time. We
right.
talked about this earlier, having a wall,
Hmm.
like we had an old home phone. We don't anymore,
Hmm.
but when I was a kid, that's how having home phones, which is crazy that that's a thing of the
Right.
past, is having that extra line. Anyway, we had the wall phone. We're all eating dinner. We're sitting down. Somebody called. My mom answers and she's like, "You called at dinner time. Click."
Yeah.
And hung up. But like I can't tell you how many times where I'm like eating dinner like on FaceTime with Katie or on the phone and like we're just chit-chatting and going about our day.
I
So
remember that being a big
anyway,
deal. And then
don't call
telemarketing
it dinner
fucking
time.
ruined that. Yeah, you don't call it dinner time. I
Yeah.
remember my parents doing the same thing. Like you don't call it dinner time. Um texting, this was something when we talked about this week's podcast. So difference between generations, 100%. Um so when you're raised with it is different than when like different than when you had to adapt to it. So my first phone had texting, kinda.
Mm-hmm.
What did they call it? T9 texting? Is that what it was
Or where
called?
you had to like press the
Like
button a
push,
million times.
yeah, you had to push the number 3 like 3 times to get to the letter that you wanted to or whatever. So that's my first cell phone and they charged you by the text message. So fast forward now, like when I got my first smartphone and it's like, oh, they don't charge for text messaging. This is amazing. You can just message people if you have a quick question. You don't have to call.
Mm-hmm.
And you get so used to that. And then you have kids who, again, were born into it. That's all they've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
They don't answer their phone, they don't make phone calls. So, but it's to the point now where there are so many texting acronyms where I just like honestly one somebody earlier to me, I have a text message campaign in our marketing software going out right now. I'm sitting here watching the text messages come in and somebody just responds WN.
What does that mean?
I thought the same fucking thing. It's wrong number.
I would have
Like
never thought that.
wrong number. Like did I inconvenience you that bad
Right.
where typing the 2 words wrong number was going to take too much out of your day?
That's crazy. I'm
It
surprised
took
I didn't
more
know
brain
that.
power. It took more brain power for me to decode what the fuck that meant. So, my kids do that every once in a it took forever for me to the 2
I
that
use
I had to
LOL.
figure
That's
out.
it. That's it.
I still use LOL, which I think
I think
they make
LMAO,
fun
like
of.
how lazy am I? I think LMAO is too much. Like I'm not gonna sit there and type out
Right.
LMAO, but I'll type LOL.
For the longest time, my kids would text me WYD.
What are you doing?
I know. Do you know how long it took me to figure out what the fuck that meant? I'm like, "What? Huh?" And then they just would send it again. Or just even it's like, can you just 2 words, 2, 3 words. Just type it. You can fucking talk and text.
Something else I want to kind of like
Man, drives me
segue
bonkers.
into in a way, and this isn't really like, this is kind of just like a clear cut. We're gonna go into it.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, like, with your like age in the dating pool compared to your kids, like, what are the differences?
Girl,
I have
I
like
didn't date.
oh yeah, that's right. You just kind of imprinted.
What? I went from one
Hey,
house to the
Justin.
next. Don't know what dating's like. I mean, I know enough what dating's like listening to like his horror stories of it. But can you imagine like having to meet people face to face in order to go on a date?
That's crazy. Like, my first relationship, I was like 2 weeks from graduating high school. That's when I like officially had a boyfriend.
Right.
And it's because I knew him from high school, you know?
Yeah.
Compared to like, for me, I've gone on like traditional dates. Somebody's asked me on a date, I'll go, we'll have dinner, you know?
Sure.
Like, I think that's normal. However, I did meet Cole through TikTok. So there's that. That's already different. But my sister Ella dated somebody in high school, and they dated for some odd months, and they never texted or called each other. They would just Snapchat. That's how they communicated, was through Snapchat.
What age?
And she was
high school?
Senior.
I think Miles had his first quote unquote girlfriend, and it was just a Snapchat girlfriend, but it would have been like middle school, like higher middle school, maybe freshman of high school.
And that's something that's so crazy, is that it was just like, why don't you guys just call and talk to each other? No, that's weird. I can't double snap him, which means send 2 Snapchats in a row. Like, I don't know all the restrictions. I thought it was weird. Yeah, there's so many rules when it comes to that. Like, I feel like as generations go on, they've made dating more complex. Like, because I think of dating as, okay, a guy thinks you're...
I think because everybody, like, you think it's so scary, and I don't, and that could be like, as a single girl. I mean, I don't know, if you're a single person,
but that's also like,
you have to be careful. But
using apps like Tinder and stuff like that, Bumble, whatever they're called, having that out there, I think, is more traumatizing than somebody coming up to you in a social setting who either has common interests as you or finds you attractive and says, hey, I would like to take you out. And I think that you could get a read on a person way better than through a phone. And that's something that generationally, like, people are going on the apps. There's so many different apps for so many different sexualities and so many interests. And there's like there's like Tinder or Bumble best friends, where you can find just friends online and meet them.
Right. And so that kind of reminded me, last night Gabrielle came over for dinner, and she said that oh man, I'm trying to remember the context of the conversation, but she's like, and then I can just go home and go back to my bubble. Well, the world, again, instant gratification, you can create your own bubble. Like, and this whole the whole society right now, like, kids can now, or younger people in their 20s can now create this bubble. Like, I can work from home, or I can work from home and then come home and just do what I want with my interests. They've become more independent. So if you're already somewhat antisocial, there's no way that you would have been able to date or find a significant other without some sort of social group. And that's basically how people did it. Like, you either went to bars, you went to nightclubs, and if that wasn't your scene, you actually went out and joined other social groups, where now they have apps. They have apps for you to find the right social group if you actually do want to get out of your house.
That's something that my mom always told me too, is like, even when, and this was just for friendships, this wasn't for dating. She was like, you need to go out and find people that have the same common interests as you, so you can have that like bubble. You can create that bubble. Not that I can expand my bubble. Let's just say that, because I was one of those girls with my previous relationship that if he wasn't around to hang out, I didn't go out.
Yeah.
She's like, you're getting depressed. You need to go out, go find something to do. Like, go join an art class, go do that. I'm like, that's weird. Like, see, there seems things like that that are normal for.
Yeah. There's, I mean, you see some value in that now, like, as you get older.
Yeah,
but if you think about it, when you're in middle school and high school, it's like you're trapped, like, with the same group of people. So you have to either you create social connections or you are miserable, because middle school is the most traumatizing part of most people's lives, and high school can be if you're not in with the right, like, and the thing that I think, the thing that sucks is when you're in a smaller school, you don't have
Mhm.
as many options. When you're in a larger school, you can still somewhat find that bubble because there's more interest, there's more diversity, where
Right.
in smaller schools you can't get that. And then the minute you get out of high school, if you don't go straight into college, and honestly, college, I think,
I didn't talk to anybody in college. I
yeah,
went to
sometimes you
class because I
don't.
went to UMSL.
Hmm.
I commuted. I was the editor of the newspaper, and I talked to one other person. And other than that, it was I go to class, I go home, I go to work. I did full time school and
Hmm.
full time work, and it was just like I'm doing this for me, not for any of you people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I ended up having a small group of people, a small group of friends, because if you're in the same, like, if you're in a very specialized program, you tend to
Hmm.
connect with people. It's kind of like high school. If you have a bunch of classes with the same people, you tend to form that connection. But then once you
Right.
leave that environment, like, let's say you don't go to college, if you come right out of high school, you don't realize then you're completely isolated,
Right.
because you don't see those same group of people every single day. You don't see, you actually have to make effort to
Right.
go and connect with those people. And if you don't have the desire, or somebody pushing you a little bit to get out and be social, then there's just no way. If you would have said, "Hey, I'm going to take a bunch of 20 somethings," like, let's say you grabbed five, like, it'd be a good premise of a movie. Take five 21 year olds and take them back into the past and just drop them in like 1990 and say, go get a date. Good luck.
Right. Yeah, like do it on your own.
Good luck.
You have to meet them in person. I think people would lose their minds. I am the one of those people that is jealous that they did not get enough time in the 90s. I was born in 1998. Like I didn't get enough time in the
Eh,
90s and I wish I would have had a little more time to like I don't want to wish myself older, but it was
mhm.
like some of the things I think about I'm like, I wish I could experience it cuz I got the tail end of it. So I got to experience some of it and some days I'm like I wish for that back. Like
Mhm.
just how simple things were.
I hate sounding like, I saw this TikTok and I sound like a complete grouch, but I think because I've had to adapt to technology as much as
Mhm.
I have, and it's something that I actually am passionate about and enjoy doing. Think about the generational gaps in the workplace. Like, they're like, "Hey, do you work in a business where you're with a mixture of like boomers and Gen X and millennials and Gen Z?" And I'm thinking, I mean, yeah, I've been in that mix with Gen X, but like, I'm the older end now, if we were in a traditional work setting.
Mhm.
But like, I couldn't imagine working with people where it's like making an executive level salary because they've just decided to work at the same place for the last 30 years, and they don't know how to
Right.
read an email
Right.
or
There's my
respond to
dad's
an
been at the
email.
same place for the longest time, and there's so many things like he knows what he knows, and that's it. Like I mean, that's everybody,
Yeah.
but like he knows the bare minimum with technology on what he needs to do for work, and that's
Hmm.
it. Um, what's so crazy? Do you remember that TikTok that went viral of the kid at Starbucks that was complaining like I had to work an 8 hour shift on my feet, and like I got it one
No.
15-minute break that entire 8 hours, and it's like
Huh.
some of these people
Neat.
growing up now that are in that, it's just like,
I did that. I
that's
worked at a
hard.
grocery store. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was hard. I didn't realize that was hard work. Man, that's gonna make me
I
sound real
didn't
old.
either.
If you
Well,
if
no,
you
I didn't realize that's hard work either. Like, I worked a shift job, an hourly,
right?
like
Mm-hmm.
where, before I was in an office or before I was doing any of this, and you have your shifts. And I didn't have any breaks at the bowling alley. Like, there's times I would
Yeah.
be able, it'd be slow, so you didn't have to do as
Sure.
much,
You might
but it was
might be able
on
to
your
get off your
feet
feet.
for 8 to 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked 40 plus hours a week. And the kid was complaining. I remember it was a while that it went viral, but um yeah, he was like crying in tears like, "Oh my god, I work 8 plus hours a day." It's like, "Okay. So does
Wow.
everybody else."
Yeah. See, I can't relate to that. I mean, I've never been, and I've never had to do like strenuous labor.
Mhm.
I've never been in a job where it was just strictly like a labor job, like a construction job or in a factory or something like that. Like, I've not had to do that, but I've worked, oh gosh, I mean, my first jobs were in a restaurant. So I mean, you have restaurant,
Mhm.
you're on your feet. Restaurant, grocery store, trying to think like through my head, like in my head. I mean, multiple all through high school it was restaurants, and then a bar, and then a grocery store, a nursing home, a bank, like all the weird jobs that I had through college. And then from the bank, no, before the bank, worked in a call center. So it's all a variety of different basically hourly shift
Right.
works until you figure out what you want to do when you grow up.
I worked
And
2 hourly jobs at one time,
I had
even, you
3.
know?
The summer
Ooh.
between my the summer between my
That sounds rough.
senior year. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I graduated high school, and it was that summer between the end of high school and the beginning of college, I worked 3 jobs.
Hmm.
And it's just because there wasn't an hourly job that would give you 40 hours. So you worked multiple part-time jobs. I had one
Right.
that gave me a decent amount of hours, but then I was a cook at like 2 different places and trying to keep the schedule, and then decide, and I can't remember what the third job was, but at one point I was working, oh, it was a restaurant, a bar. But the restaurant and the bar, they were 2 different locations, but like they were owned by the same people, and they were
Hmm.
getting ready to close, like they were phasing one out. Like one was about to go
Hmm.
under. So they said, "Okay, well you can start cross training at the other place." Like there was only a select few of us that they were going to take over to the other place, and then in that time frame I was still working both jobs.
Oof.
And then I think like at another restaurant too, but it was, yeah, that was kind of crazy. But I can't imagine the whole like the dynamic. What were the things that like the topics we were going to talk about on this podcast? We talked about the workplace.
Relationships, dating.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Um, I mean,
Technology.
relationships, dating obviously go hand in hand. Technology,
Right.
work ethic. Um, I think that with technology, advancements in technology has affected all of these things, obviously,
Oh,
dating, work
100%.
ethic, relationships, to where there's just with more technology is an added level of stress because of all the information that you can find out. And what people,
Right.
moral of the story is ignorance is bliss, everybody.
Yeah, sometimes, man. Well, like
Ignorance is bliss.
I think that's the whole thing. The technology has created the instant gratification, which that's the huge difference
Right.
between the generations. Because you have generations that are like, I worked and I earned my way up, and like now you work history is pretty common for most people to work at a job for like 2 years because
Hmm.
they get bored. Like the corporate life is definitely, there's some corporations that are going to either go under or going to have to make huge concessions or huge changes because of the
Hmm.
generation. And I don't think that's all bad. I don't think that's all bad, because some of the corporations need to adapt, but it's because of the instant gratification. Like somebody comes in and
Right.
they master a job, they either, and I think it's perceived by older generations of like entitlement, like a sense of entitlement,
Hmm.
and it's not always that. It's they get bored. They don't want to be
Right.
complacent. They want an opportunity to grow. And they can't, like they're not looking at like I want to be at this job for the next 50 years until I retire. They want to say, okay, I want to be in this job until a better opportunity presents itself, or I can create a better opportunity for myself within this organization. And the minute that
Right.
they can't, they're out. And
Right.
if you don't either start cross training, giving people new responsibilities faster, and not overworking them, giving them something different, like giving them
Hmm.
the opportunity to pivot instead of like challenge, like either putting them in this box that they can't get out of, then you're going to be disappointed because
Right.
you're constantly going to be rehiring, and then the mindset of hiring people that some people may have had 10 years ago just doesn't apply anymore. Like that's
Right.
it's just not going to work. So, rapid fire before we get off this podcast. So, I'm going to challenge you as an elder as an elder millennial. I'm trying to think of
Okay.
pieces of technology that you would know, and maybe like, so we talked about the house phone. So you had a house phone.
Right.
It was a
Had a house
rotary
phone.
phone.
Yep.
And we talked about, well, we were on the phone earlier about if you remember back when phone lines were installed, they used to give you a phone.
I
So
think I remember. I think I remember. Don't quote me on that,
they used to
but
be hardwired. So the house that we live in now, when Justin bought the house, there was a rotary phone that you couldn't disconnect because it was
Mhm.
hardwired into the line that came into the house. So if you
Mhm.
tried to cut that phone and get rid of it, you would not have access to a phone line in the house. It was how it
Wow.
was wired was all weird. So And obviously, like if we start talking about like music and things like that, you you have like records have made a comeback, vinyl records have made a comeback. So
I know, it's
that's
huge.
so that I can't really. What
Huge.
about eight tracks?
8 tracks. My mom and dad, I was exposed to them as a child. My mom and dad both had them.
They would have
Um,
had them as kids, I imagine.
yeah, my dad had an old player, I think.
My dad did, and he
I just
kept
know
it.
I was exposed to those as a kid. I've never personally used one myself, but I remember my parents talking
Yeah,
about them.
my dad had a car for the longest time that still had an 8 track
Hmm.
player in it. Um, have you ever used a fax machine?
Yes, I have. And you know what's so crazy actually? I have used a fax machine. I've witnessed one
Mm-hmm.
being used multiple times. But what's so crazy is the printer that I have now, the average desk-sized printer, comes with an app and I can fax things through my phone.
Really
Yeah, so
interesting.
I literally take a picture of
Yeah.
whatever I need to fax and send it,
Now
and
I have
it's
an
good to
app
go.
that just I have an app that just does that. Like you pay for it monthly. It's cheap, but
Yeah.
if you need to, but yeah, it's very rare. I'm trying to think something that I would have had as a kid. Like we could talk about toys and all kinds of stuff like that, but did your grandparents ever have so stereos, TVs like were parts of furniture?
Hmm.
So, have you ever seen like the gigantic radio that looked like a chest and it was about waist high and you opened it up and it had all the controls on the top and sometimes had a turntable for a record, but it looked like a damn piece of furniture. It was so big that it had a
Yes.
wooden top. A lot of grandparents had that.
So I don't think my grandparents, I think I know what you're talking about. Just I never had the record player part
Yeah.
at the top. Um, I know what you're talking about, but I
And
can't remember if I've.
the reason that it was so big and it looked like a piece of furniture is because the middle part were the speakers.
Hmm.
All the stereo components were on the top. The front was the speaker, and yeah, like sometimes it had the turntable in it. But I remember that was like big piece of furniture. Well, you either learn it through pop culture or like and a lot of that you did from your parents showing you things like movies, music, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Like that's typically where you have the exposure because there's some movies that wouldn't age well. God, what was one that we were there was one that we were watching the other day and it was one of those early 2000s movies where everything was like we have to take this floppy disk or something to like it like some sort of secret data and it's always on like some sort of piece of media that doesn't exist anymore and I
Right.
it's like that kind of stuff that my kids would be like what the hell is that
What
it's
is
like
that?
oh
Yeah.
I think that was like the second wave of floppy disks that existed
Right.
um but yeah I'm just trying to anything I always think of like music. I'll probably think of other things later, but just the different tools and things like that. That if you ever lived in a house that
Yeah.
didn't have air conditioning,
No.
yeah.
No, I
So
haven't.
my
So
parents' house
well,
did not have air conditioning on the upstairs.
my so I wouldn't. It's not. I've never lived, as in resided in this house. My
Yep.
ex-boyfriend has property, and the house that was built on it is old, and it didn't have air conditioning at all. So when we'd go there for the weekends, we'd stay without air conditioning until my allergies got really bad,
Hmm.
and then his dad purchased the window units so that
Right.
the air conditioning could get going, and I wasn't like puffy-eyed and miserable the whole time.
Yeah, I can't think of any other things like off the top of my head. I mean, obviously I've I'm not that old where I can't say that I lived in a house that didn't have like running water or but you know,
Oh
depending
my god,
on
that
like
sounds horrible.
yeah. No, I remember my dad telling me stories of like when they moved like he remembers living on the farm when they didn't have bathrooms and
Hmm.
stuff and it was like it
Mm.
was installed or the area even the area where he basically grew up like my grandparents lived there until they passed away the house he told stories about when people were first building houses there until it got connected to city water like some people had outhouses because they just didn't,
Really?
because they were waiting for the city to, because it was like a new subdivision back in the 50s. So there were people when they first built their house, they built an outhouse in the back just until like the rest of the infrastructure was put in. I don't think the house that my grandparents built was ever like that, but at least I don't remember the stories. So, but I
Yeah.
do remember, like, I remember distinctively, like, the house my parents, that we grew up in,
Mm-hmm.
it was just an old house. So the upstairs just didn't have proper ventilation. Like, it just didn't have heat, it didn't have air conditioning. And
Right.
so there were many a summers that my brother and I were sleeping in the living room where there was air conditioning. And eventually later down the line, they got like a window unit, but it's just
Right.
the house was so damn old, the central air did not work
That's crazy.
properly.
And that's all like stuff that has to be in
Mm-hmm.
inspections and whatnot when buying a house that's built this day and
Right.
age.
Have you ever been in a house that had an intercom system built into the walls?
No,
Very
that's a
popular in
thing.
the 60s, yeah. So
Wow.
my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live in one. They bought the house, I think, from the original owner. And it was a little old lady, and she was, going to live in like a retirement community. And the house, you had speakers in the wall, and
Hmm.
you could either turn on a switch where it would play like AM FM radio through all the little speakers in the house, or it was like an
Really?
intercom system where you could call people. There was usually a receiver downstairs and there was a receiver upstairs. And so what's funny, fast forward like to the 80s, um or even my parents had this just before they passed away. It's kind of crazy that you could buy, they had cell phones. They both had cell
Hmm.
phones. My dad had his own like man cave bedroom in the basement, and my mom stayed upstairs on the main floor. She bought these little three-way intercoms, which are kind of like a like evolved version of that built into the walls, except you can plug them
Hmm.
in. And so they had three. She had one in her room, one down next to my dad, and then one back on the back deck in case they were outside. And you just
Oh,
push the button and
geez.
talk into it, and then you hear it. And
Well, they
that's,
do. They have like a modern version of that now. It's like with
yeah,
I don't want to say it too loud because mine would hear me.
yeah.
Alexa. They have that now where you can like if you have the app on your phone, you can communicate to whoever's in the room with the
Right.
system.
Sometimes you forget about that because that used to be like a big, like you saw it in offices, like where it was connected
Mhm.
to an office phone, but it was like the little home version, and my
Right.
grandparents had it. It's just a little box you plug in and you can still buy them. Like you could legitimately probably go to Walmart right now and buy
Hmm.
like a two or a three-way intercom. But that was something that was like a big deal. Big deal to have in your house. Or I remember the first cordless phone. Um, Crazy story. If you live in a small town and the only place that you can go shop is Walmart, it's very common that like you and a lot of your neighbors are probably going to buy the same cordless phone.
Hmm.
And there were some times you could pick up your cordless phone and you would be on the phone with your neighbors. You could hear their whole phone conversation. Like the frequencies would jive, and
That's
you
crazy.
wouldn't get, so you'd have to go ask your neighbors, like, okay, do you have this phone? Yeah. Okay. Can you put yours on channel A and we'll put ours on channel B because we can hear everything you're saying. And
That's crazy.
you wouldn't even get a dial tone. Do you remember like old school um cordless phones where you pick it up and you turn it on to get the dial tone, then dial your number?
Hmm.
You could turn the phone on to get a dial tone, and it would just be somebody already talking on the phone, and it was picking up the conversation of the
That's
next door
dangerous
neighbors.
these days because I can't tell you how many times I've like been on the phone and like saying something to Cole or saying something to somebody else that this person on the phone probably doesn't need to hear, and then
Right.
hearing them pick up and being like, "Hi, how are you?" Like cut the conversation and go. That'd be wild.
That would be real. Yeah, it was really weird. And so you'd have to tell them like, "Hey," like, because we couldn't call out. And I don't know if it happened if it was only one way or if it was both ways. I
Hmm.
would assume it's both ways. And that's why you'd have to like go talk to your neighbors and be like, "Hey, like I could hear everything you guys were saying. So can we make sure that our phones are on different frequencies?" You'd have like three channels, kind of like walkie-talkies.
But did you ever spy on them?
I'm sure my mom did. I didn't. Yeah. I
God
can
rest her soul.
Yeah, I'm sure my mom did. But like if I picked it up, I was always like, "Oh shit," because I always thought they could hear me. So like
That's terrifying.
I never did. That was some of those weird. That's one of those weird technology things that most people wouldn't remember. Makes
That's
me sound
funny.
really old.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Fuck Your Podcast. If you would like us to discuss a topic, or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can follow us on Instagram at F__K your pod, or you can email me at Emma@99creatives.com, and you can email Katy at
Katy@99creatives.com.
Generational Gap.
Nailed it, and I feel
I
really
don't know what
fucking
else to
old
say
right now.
But I also feel old. Okay.
What?
My sisters the other day told me I wasn't hip anymore. I didn't know the lingo and that I'm too old to like say any lingo. So
And that's when you just, because she's your sister, you just go, no, well, you just sound stupid.
Well,
that's a response I would have if anybody made me feel old.
Well, I could still tell my sister, at least I could legally drink. My youngest sister. She turns 21 this year. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, bye.